As we said, the aspect of the mother that we'll explore today is that of Mahakali, power. And power has different meanings and different connotations in today's context. But what we're going to be exploring is what the power of the mother is. Just to give a context, and we may have read this, we're familiar, but for the benefit of our audience, I'm just going to read what Mahakali, the aspect of the mother as shared by Sri Aurobindo. Mahakali is of another nature, not wideness, but height. Not wisdom, but force and strength are her peculiar power. There is in her an overwhelming intensity, a mighty passion of force to achieve, a divine violence rushing to shatter every limit and obstacle. All her divinity leaps out in a splendor of tempestuous action. She's there for swiftness, for the immediately effective process, the rapid and direct stroke, the frontal assault that carries everything before it. Terrible is her face to the Asura, dangerous and ruthless her moods against the haters of the divine. For she is the warrior of the worlds, who never shrinks from the battle. Intolerant of imperfection, she deals roughly with all in man that is unwilling, and she is severe to all that is obstinately ignorant and obscure. Her wrath is immediate and dire against treachery and falsehood and malignity. Ill will is smitten at once by her scourge. Indifference, negligence, and sloth in the divine work she cannot bear, and she smites awake at once with sharp pain, if need be, the ultimate slumber and the loiterer. The impulses that are swift and straight and frank, the movements that are unreserved and absolute, the aspiration that mounts in flame are the motion of Mahakali. Her spirit is tameless, her vision and will are high and far-reaching like the flight of an eagle. Her feet are rapid on the upward way, and her hands are outstretched to strike and to succor. For she too is the mother, and her love is as intense as her wrath, and she has a deep and passionate kindness. When she is allowed to intervene in her strength, then in one moment are broken like things without consonance, the obstacles that immobilize the enemies that assail the seeker. If her anger is dreadful to the hostile, and the vehemence of a pressure painful to the weak and timid, she is loved and worshipped by the great, the strong and the noble, for they feel that her blows beat what is rebellious in their material into strength and perfect truth. Hammer straight what is weary and perverse, and expel what is impure or defective. But for her, what is done in a day might have taken centuries. Without her, Ananda might be wide and grave or soft and sweet and beautiful, but would lose the flaming of joy of its most absolute intensities. To knowledge, she gives a conquering might, brings to beauty and harmony a high and mounting movement, and imparts to the slow and difficult labor, after perfection, an impetus that multiplies the power and shortens the long way. Nothing can satisfy her that falls short of the supreme ecstasies, the highest heights, the noblest aims, and the largest vistas. Therefore, with her is the victorious force of the divine, and it is by grace of a fire and passion and speed if the great achievement can be done now rather than thereafter. So quite a powerful aspect of Mahakali. And today also the discussion is the aspect of power, the resolute will and the impetus to act. So in that sense, Dr. Mera Beloo, if I can call you, I'm inviting you to think about the perspective of intolerant of imperfection, Scrooge and Hammer, linking it with sincerity, the value or the quality that we're pursuing this week. Wrath is immediate and dire against treachery and falsehood and malignity. Ill will is smitten at once by her Scrooge. So given this line and given the context of what we spoke, what are your thoughts, what are your observations, and how does it come into play in daily life? Because I think it's more important about how can we be present to it in the daily life, knowing that as human beings pursuing spirituality, there is imperfection and yet there is perfection. Yes. So inviting you to share your thoughts.
Good. Thank you so much, Sudha, for reading out that beautiful passage from the mother. And I happened to bring the book along with me, and as I was reading it, it's like, no matter how many times you've read or any of these passages, but now concentrating or meditating on Mahakali again, kind of like it takes you to that place. And I was thinking exactly along the same lines in which you're asking the question about the daily life. How do we, is this working? Am I audible? What does it mean for me in daily life? I'll start with that. So this idea, which you just asked, intolerant of imperfection, and the way Sri Aurobindo continues that sentence, she deals roughly with all that is unwilling, and she's severe to all that is obstinately ignorant and obscure. Intolerant of imperfection, this comes, the wrath, the scourge, the hammer, all that intolerance comes very easily when we see the imperfection in the other, in somebody outside us. But the real challenge or the real power of Mahakali would be when I'm beginning to see this within me, and then do I have the courage to use that hammer to pull that what is unwilling in me. Because see, Mother and Sri Aurobindo both at many places have spoken about the power of Mahakali or the work of Mahakali connected with the work of progress and transformation. So Mahakali's main work is to facilitate quick progress, facilitate easy transformation. Easy not in the sense that it will be quick like that, but to clear the path for transformation. And once somebody had asked Sri Aurobindo, has there been anyone who has, with whom Mother has used the power of Mahakali for that person's, that sadhak's continuing progress? And he said, yes, there has been one, and in one stroke, so many of the old sanskaras and attachments and old patterns of the mind were gone. But most of us are not ready for that. So when it comes to this idea of being intolerant of imperfection, we are very quick to see, you are not doing it rightly. And in daily life, this is the work that, this is part of our regular experience, especially when we are working with others. And that's why Mother insisted so much on working with others, not just sitting in my own room and writing books and or articles after articles, but to collaborate with others on various projects, because that's where the rub happens on egos. And that's where conflicts happen, and that's where our own imperfections come out. But even in those situations, we quickly say, you are not doing it rightly. And every time there is that movement of anger, it's the beginning of that Mahakali force. That, even if I may not take out the hammer literally or figuratively, but if inside something is boiling because my colleague hasn't done the way I'd like to do things, or the way I would have liked her to do things, that would be, something we'll have to think about it. The other aspect, the other thing that I think is very interesting to keep in our front as we continue our conversation is that, and as you were reading, we often forget just as intense the force of Mahakali is, equally intense is her love. So in order to be worthy of that highly intense love, we have to be a little bit ruthless with our imperfections, stricter than usual with our imperfections if we want to deserve Mahakali's love. So, you know, that is very important. I think I'll take a pause here and see what my co-panelists have to say, and then we'll...
Yeah, so as you were sharing, for me, the images that came, one is, you look within, within the imperfections, and to see when there is a trigger, what does one really need to look about that.
Yeah.
And the rub and the friction when we are working with people, because that's when it gets intensifies, the trigger gets triggered, and when it is not, you're in peace and calm. But also the image of fire, flame, passion, intensity, which seems like you're there always, and I leave that, but also that there is a cooling. But for that cooling, there has to be this passage of fire. When and how does that cooling can even happen? Because one is, can I dry up from within if I'm constantly doing this work? And how do I therefore balance that? Do I balance that from within, or do I balance that from outside? So I would love to bring this back, and if you can just hold that, and maybe I don't know whether the others have that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question to come back to. But I'll just add one more thing in terms of linking it with sincerity. And I think this is the key here, to root out the imperfections. It is not the imperfections in the system outside, imperfection within me that we have to root out, and for that the ultimate test is sincerity. And at one place, Mother said that to be fully sincere requires a lot of courage. So it's very interesting how you are linking the aspect of Mahakali with sincerity, with, you know, choosing these few key words: the power, courage, resolute will, impetus to act. Because without sincerity, we cannot act. Without sincerity, we cannot aspire for true power. Without sincerity, without resolute will, there is no sincerity. Without sincerity, there cannot be true resolute will. So the connection between these aspects is also very interesting. So in that sense, I must congratulate whoever designed this, theme, that to pick out these sub-themes within Sri Aurobindo's very elaborate description of Mahakali, and to identify things and connect them with sincerity. So that's very important, because hypocrisy is the first enemy of sincerity. And how do you root out hypocrisy if you don't have the courage to be very honest within? Honest to yourself, honest, of course, honest to the divine. You cannot deceive the divine, but we are very good at deceiving ourselves all the time, giving all kinds of excuses and justifications for our behavior. So there also, Mahakali will eventually act if we hold on to those hypocritical justifications of our own imperfections. So, yeah.
Thank you for that linking.